All right, welcome to Church Dropout. It is what it is. Another episode where I talk about just things that are on my mind and some things that, that I just want to talk about. And this is outside of what we do on our podcast. The podcast is still going with my wife and I. That hasn't stopped. So I know some people have asked, like, okay, when are you guys dropping another episode? But that is still happening. This is just another way for me to create content outside of the podcast itself. And I want to talk a little bit about something that I mentioned in a previous video. And there was someone who asked me to expound just a little bit upon it. This idea of character and why character matters. Really, that was the foundation of what I was talking about. But I made a statement saying that, your character is one of the only things that will go with you into eternity, that you will take your character with you. And so what I want to talk about is, and expound on that a little bit, is why character matters. Why character matters. And, really why it matters beyond just being obedient because the scripture tells us to, or fearing the Lord. I'm not saying that those are not good reasons to be obedient, to bear fruit, to bear character. But I think one of the main reasons we as Christians should look to bear character is because our character goes with us. God has promised us in Scripture that He will continue this good work that He is doing in us until its full completion. And in sanctification, that's what we have, right? Is this idea of being made new. Sanctification is the process of being made new. And by the way, let me say this. The purpose of sanctification is not to get better, right? The purpose of sanctification is to become whole. And there's a big difference there. And I don't mean that we don't become better. I mean, the purpose of sanctification is not to make us better. It is to make us whole. It is to restore essentially what was lost in the fall, right? What was lost when what has been lost due to sin. And so when we say that sanctification is there to make us whole, then we don't look at every single circumstance as in the categories of right and wrong, although there is a category of right and wrong. We look at how this is adding to our sanctification. So let me give an example. It would be like, how we view suffering today, right? Christians avoid suffering. And I'm not saying that we should run towards it either, but Christians avoid suffering, right? And nobody wants to suffer. And I think, it would be morbid for a Christian to say, I want to suffer and to subject themselves to suffering. But if we just purely look at suffering in the categories of right and wrong, then I think we miss what can be gained from suffering, right? I don't know. I'm all over the place, but I don't know. Maybe it'll make sense. It's sort of like a spider web, right? When Jesus was asked by the disciples, this kind of just came to me. When Jesus was asked by the disciples about the blind man and for what reason was he made this way? Did his parents sin? Why was he made to be blind? And it's interesting because they were looking at things from a very, deterministic black and white perspective, right? Right and wrong, right? Somebody must have done something wrong for this man to have been born blind. And Jesus adds another category to their thinking. He says that the glory of God may be displayed in him and to the world, right? There's another category, even though this man is suffering and he suffered loss, his sight, and it's affected his whole life, there is something to be gained by that. And I think that when we look at pain, suffering, loss, even sin to some degree as just right and wrong, we miss the opportunity to see how these things can be used for our good to bring about wholeness in us as people of God and not just make us better. And so kind of getting back to, and I think this has everything to do with the idea of character. and why I think we should pursue good character as Christians. And by character, let me just make that clear. I'm not just talking about virtues, right? I'm not just talking about, just virtues. And, I'm talking about character in terms of what the scripture would call fruit, why it's important for us as Christians to bear fruit, and why we build character and bear fruit as Christians, and why that is a good thing. And the main reason is because, again, it's the one thing that'll go with us into eternity. We will not cease being who we are, when we are with Jesus. Now, there are things that will be different, but we will not cease to be who we are in terms of, we are not going to become different people. We will be fully redeemed and sanctified folks, but we will still learn. We will still gain understanding, and we will have all eternity to do so. And that's a beautiful prospect to me, right? And the things that we have gained and learned here about God, and the things that we have gained and learned here about Jesus, and the relationship that we have nurtured here, will go with us into eternity. And that's why character matters, is because we're building upon something that has value, that reaches far beyond just this world. And again, this is why as Christians, we need to have an eternal perspective and not just an earthly perspective. Because, there is a grand plan, a greater plan, a culmination of things that will happen. And part of that is what we are participating in now. And so when we participate with the Spirit in our sanctification, and we build character and we bear fruit, we are working towards eternity. We are building towards the outcome that God desires for us. We are participating in God's completing of this good work that he began in us. And so that's why character matters. It doesn't just matter because we are, and I don't mean just, it doesn't matter just because we fear the Lord, and that, we want to be obedient because we fear the Lord. It doesn't just matter because the scripture tells us that we ought to be obedient. And I'm not saying that those are bad reasons. Those are good reasons. The scripture talks about those reasons. I'd be a fool to say that. But I also think that it matters because it has eternal value. It has greater value. I think this is in part what Jesus is getting at when he says, talks about storing treasures in heaven, right? Thinking heavenly, and, thinking about the things that you can take with you and the things that you will leave here. When we bear fruit, we are storing for ourselves up treasures in heaven. We are storing things that go with us, and opposed to, investing in things that don't matter, and so this is why everyday obedience and character matters. And it's the one thing that we could take into eternity. And when we look at scripture, we see this unfolding story, this unfolding narrative of God's redemption that's currently being worked out, and that will come to a consummation upon Christ's return, and then into that next age. This is a part of it. That story and that work begins now. It is happening right now. And so every decision that we make here matters. It matters, and it's not just an exercise. It is something that contributes to who we are becoming in Jesus. And so, I don't know, just some thoughts there. I definitely will have more to say on this. I just wanted to kind of give a little bit more meat on the bones of that idea. I would love to hear what you think about this. And so thank you again for tuning in to Church Dropout. Another episode of It Is What It Is. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, on building character, why character matters, and and why we should embrace the things that we confront, or were confronted with here. Not in the sense of they are all good and beautiful, but they can be good and beautiful because God takes those things and makes them work to our favor. And part of that is building us up. And part of that is adding to our character. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about this. Drop a comment below. Keep the conversation moving forward. As always, keep it respectful. Thank you so much again for tuning in. And we'll talk soon. God bless. Bye-bye.